There's a second brain inside your body. You are not taught about it in school. It does not think the way your brain thinks. It does not have consciousness or language or the ability to reason about abstract problems. But it has 100 million neurons, more than your spinal cord. It produces 90% of your body's serotonin. It communicates with your brain constantly through a dedicated neural highway, and it makes decisions about your body that your brain never gets to override. It is called the enteric nervous system, and the more scientists study it, the more it becomes clear that the relationship between your gut and your brain is not the one you were taught. You were taught that your brain runs your body. The reality is more complicated, more strange, and more unsettling than that. Your brain does not simply send instructions downward. Information flows both ways. And the majority of the traffic, roughly 80%, travels upward from the gut to the brain, not the other way around. Your gut is not waiting for instructions. It is sending them. The enteric nervous system was first described in detail by British physiologist John Newport Langley in the late 19th century, who recognized it as a third division of the autonomic nervous system, alongside the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems you have probably heard of. But for most of the 20th century, the enteric nervous system was considered a relatively minor system, responsible mainly for the mechanics of digestion, for moving food through the gut, for controlling the contractions of the intestinal wall. It was understood as a local controller, a kind of manager of plumbing, not a system with implications for mood, cognition, and mental health. That understanding has been overturned completely. The gut-brain axis is now one of the most active areas of research in all of biomedical science. And what it has revealed is that the gut is not simply a digestive organ. It is a sensory organ, a hormonal organ, an immune organ, and a major node in the body's emotional and psychological regulation system. The gut contains more immune cells than any other organ in the body. It hosts an ecosystem of approximately 38 trillion microorganisms, the gut microbiome, that collectively weigh about 2 kilograms, produce hundreds of bioactive compounds, and communicate with both the enteric nervous system and the brain in ways that are still being mapped. The microbiome is not decorative. It is operational. The vagus nerve is the primary physical highway between the gut and the brain. It is the longest nerve in the body, running from the brainstem all the way down through the neck, chest, and abdomen, branching into almost every major organ along the way. And here's the thing that most people do not know. Approximately 80% of the fibers in the vagus nerve are afferent, meaning they carry information upward from the gut and other organs to the brain, not downward from the brain to the body. The gut is talking. The brain is mostly listening. What is the gut saying? Researchers are still working out the full vocabulary, but the signals include information about the composition of the gut's contents, the state of its microbial ecosystem, the integrity of its lining, the presence of pathogens or irritants, the balance of various metabolites and neurotransmitters. The gut sends these signals continuously, and the brain processes them, largely without conscious awareness, and adjusts mood, appetite, energy, stress responses, and motivation accordingly. This is why the feeling in your stomach is not a metaphor. The gut feeling is a real physiological signal. When you walk into a room and something feels wrong, when you meet someone and something in you recoils before you can articulate why, when a decision that looks perfectly rational on paper nevertheless produces a sensation of unease that you cannot explain, your gut is communicating. Not through language, not through conscious reasoning, through a direct neural signal that bypasses the rational mind entirely and arrives in the brainstem as a feeling. The neuroscientist Antonio Damasio spent decades studying patients who had damage to the regions of the brain that receive and process these bodily signals. He found something remarkable. People who lost access to their gut feelings also lost the ability to make good decisions. They could reason perfectly. They could analyze options. They could construct elaborate arguments for different courses of action. But without the somatic signal, the bodily feeling that tagged certain options as safe or dangerous, good or bad, they were paralyzed, or they made consistently terrible choices. Damasio called this the somatic marker hypothesis, The idea that what we experience as intuition or gut feeling is actually an integrated physiological signal that encodes accumulated experience and guides decision-making in ways that conscious reasoning alone cannot replicate. Your gut is not interfering with your rational decision-making. It is completing it. Now, consider the microbiome. The 38 trillion organisms living in your gut are not passive residents. They are active participants in your biology. They produce neurotransmitters, including serotonin, dopamine, GABA, and norepinephrine, that influence mood and cognition. They produce short-chain fatty acids that cross the blood-brain barrier and affect brain function directly. They regulate the immune system in ways that have downstream effects on neuroinflammation and mental health. They produce compounds that influence the stress response, sleep architecture, and even social behavior. The research on the microbiome and mental health is still young, but it is already extraordinary. Studies have shown that germ-free mice raised without any gut microbiome, show dramatically elevated stress responses and anxiety-like behaviors compared to normal mice. When the gut microbiome is transplanted from anxious mice into germ-free mice, the recipients begin to display anxious behaviors. When the gut microbiome of calm mice is transplanted, the anxious behaviors diminish. The microbiome is not just affecting the gut. It is affecting the brain, the behavior, and the emotional life of the animal. In human studies, the findings are beginning to accumulate. Research has found associations between the composition of the gut microbiome and rates of depression, anxiety, autism spectrum disorder, Parkinson's disease, and Alzheimer's disease. The causal relationships are still being established, and the field is moving fast, with a necessary caution about overclaiming. But the direction of the evidence is clear. What lives in your gut has consequences for what happens in your brain. There is a reason the word gut appears in so many expressions about emotion and instinct. Gut feeling, gut reaction, gut check, trust your gut. These are not metaphors. They are imprecise descriptions of a real physiological system that operates below the threshold of conscious awareness and shapes your experience of the world in ways your conscious mind takes credit for, but does not fully understand. The discovery that the gut has its own nervous system, its own ability to process information, coordinate responses, and communicate with the brain, has forced a fundamental revision of how scientists think about the relationship between the body and the mind. The old model was a hierarchy, the brain at the top controlling everything below. The new model is a network, a constantly communicating system in which the gut, the brain, the immune system, and the microbiome are all in continuous dialogue, and in which the boundary between thinking and feeling, between cognition and physiology, is far less clear than we assumed. This has profound implications for how we understand mental health. Depression is not simply a brain disease. It is increasingly understood as a systemic condition involving dysregulation of the gut-brain axis, chronic low-grade neuroinflammation, alterations in the microbiome, and changes in the processing of bodily signals. The brain is involved, certainly, but the gut is involved too. And so is the immune system, and so is the vagus nerve. And so is the composition of the microbial ecosystem that you have been feeding or neglecting since the moment you were born. The gut does not think, but it is wrong to say it does not participate in thought. It participates through the signals it sends, through the neurotransmitters it produces, through the immune molecules it generates, through the feelings it creates in response to the state of the internal environment. The gut is one of the most important information processing systems in the body, and it is sending data to your brain right now about your internal state, about what it needs, about what it is encountering. Your brain is interpreting that data and generating from it your current mood, your current level of anxiety, your current sense of whether things are okay or not okay, the conviction you feel about a decision you're trying to make, the subtle unease that is making it hard to concentrate, the unexpected calmness you feel in a particular place or with a particular person. All of it is, in part, your gut talking. The relationship between your two brains is not one of command and obedience. It is more like a long, ongoing conversation between two partners who have been working together for so long that they have learned to anticipate each other, to complete each other's sentences, to send signals that the other interprets before consciously registering that a message has arrived. You think your brain is running the show, and it is, but it is running the show on information that your gut is constantly feeding it. And without that feed, it would be flying blind. The brain you're most familiar with, the one that reads these words, that plans your future, that generates your sense of self, is operating on a foundation of bodily data that it did not generate and cannot fully access. It is making decisions you experience as rational, as chosen, as yours, based in part on signals from an organ that has no language, that predates the cortex by hundreds of millions of years, and that has been quietly running part of your show from the moment you were born. Your gut has a brain, and right now, while you're reading this, it is telling your brain something. Your brain is listening, and neither of them are telling you what they're talking about.